You are listening to the Cup of Kudos Show, a podcast focused on sharing content filled with insight, motivation, inspiration, and sometimes a little spunk. All right, it's a beautiful day today. I hope you're having a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for tuning in. This is Elizabeth with Kudos Magazine coming on to share a podcast focusing on caregiving for the caregivers. Got to give them a little bit of love too. So if you have struggled with caregiver burnout and stress, this is definitely a message for you. And hopefully you can share it with other people that you think could maybe benefit from some of the things that we're going to talk about today. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, make sure that you tune in. You can find us on YouTube at Kudos Magazine, or Cup of Kudos actually, on YouTube. And then you can find us on Facebook at Kudos Magazine. So much technology and so much information out here. It's important to let caregivers know that they're not alone. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come on here and talk to you guys a little bit about, taking some time to take care of yourself if you're a caregiver. So often caregivers will give so much of themselves to the point that they literally are deteriorating and not taking the time to really give themselves some TLC. And the truth is when the caregiver deteriorates, nobody wins. And it's a struggle that happens far too often. And I think part of it has to do with while people are going through that moment, they may be either too busy or maybe even too prideful to share that it's too much, that they're feeling like their cross is too much, that they need help. And hopefully by having more open dialogue like this, we can start to lead a little bit more truth to people, being able to feel, hey, I can say this and I'm not going to feel like a horrible person. So to start with, today, a couple things I want to talk to you about are caregiver burnout. And one of the things that stems from is investing so much into other people that there's not time invested into yourself. And there can be a lot of things that end up becoming telltale signs that path is emerging. So let's just dive right into it. So an honesty check would be lack of sleep, and it's common for caregivers to give it maybe their all, and through it they have so much exhaustion. Even when they do get to the point of being able to sleep, it may not be a deep, restful sleep, allowing their body and their mind to rejuvenate overnight. And then as a result, everything stems and it can become more and more difficult, including a reduced ability to concentrate on things and even mood swings, or not being able to be your true authentic self because there's just so much of yourself that's poured into that other person. And recently I had stumbled across this video from a doctor from Mayo Clinic, Dr. Edward Sherigan. I hope I'm saying it right. Creagan. And I'm going to include a link in the description so you can go check out his video. But he was a combination of very truthful mixed with some humor. And it was good to hear somebody from another point of view of research saying some of these things that I think caregivers can articulate but maybe only to themselves. They don't know how to say it out loud to other people. But some of the things that he had talked about is, when people start to suffer from caregiver burnout, that, with all the multitasking, research has shown that most likely they have a 50% more chance of making an error or making a mistake. And that could go back to, being under stress, having lack of sleep, among other things. But all these things are interconnected. And as we start to talk about these truths, that's how we can deteriorate the things that are holding us back and empower ourselves to live healthier, better lives. And some of that even has to do with guilt of feeling like you're the sole provider of care for that one person, that, it's selfish if you take care of yourself because somebody else can benefit from you supporting them. But one thing that you may not know is that cancer and heart attacks have a significantly higher rate among caregivers. And it's often that you'll hear about caregiver dying even before the patient, because so often the patient is the core focus, that nobody's giving back to the caregiver or really truly checking on the caregiver, or the caregiver, you may be notorious for hiding truth and not telling the stress or the load that you're carrying, and trying to wear that happy face of being able to do it all. But this is where, at a certain point of being able to reach out to somebody else for additional support to get through it is something that may be necessary. But that burnout is something that's very real, and it's something that's far too often hidden. And often caregivers will be left in a place of solitude unless they're there to care specifically for that patient. So the one thing to keep in mind is, although you may need moments of some solitude, you being alone taking care of the patient is not solitude. And you may have to remind this to loved ones and friends, because some of them are completely oblivious to the schedule that you may be living with of 24/7 care of another human being. So that great responsibility is something that you experience every day. But the people that aren't living in that house may not know the full scope of what some of those things may require. And this can be caregiving, whether it's for an elderly parent or grandparent, or even caregiving for a child who has long-term care that requires 24-hour care. It's a different way of living, and it's a different way of life. But many people that aren't faced with that situation can't understand that there's no such thing as 9 to 5 and then you shut it off. So this is where it comes to a point of you have to have some personal responsibility and say, hey, I'm going to do some things to be proactive and care about myself, and to be honest about it. You're not Superman or Wonder Woman. Nobody can do it completely on their own. And I'm speaking even from personal experience, because I had walked that path of being a caregiver, and it was different capacities for each situation. My husband, who required long-term health care before he passed away, was a different situation than my dad, who needed minimal assistance with anything other than, some help getting back and forth to doctors and surgeries and double checking some things and checking in on him. He was very independent, but just needed some assistance. Or in the case of my Nana, who lived till she was 99 and worked till she was 92. She was very resilient, very strong-minded up until like the very, very, very end. And even with her, there was some things from a quote unquote caregiver standpoint that I helped her with because of some forgetfulness that just started, doing a little bit of a peekaboo, but nowhere near to the extent of what it was with my spouse. And that's another thing on a side note is there's going to be different burdens that come with the different forms of caregiving, whether it is your spouse or your child, because there may be more paperwork and other responsibilities that go beyond just like the health care and physical care. It may be all these other pieces, from a legal standpoint. Or it could be somebody that just needs help with some of the basic things, whether it's, somebody that's a loved one that has cancer and they need help for short term, which is going to be different than a parent who maybe has a child that is handicapped, let's say has cerebral palsy and can't walk and is, bound to a chair. They're going to have another scope of caregiving. And so some of it can be short term, some of it can be long term, and some of it can be lifetime indefinite. But it isn't to say that you can't still have a rich, fulfilling, happy, wonderful, fantastic life. You absolutely can. However, part of it is going to come down to taking personal responsibility and making sure that these things are being spoke about honestly, instead of just I can do it all. And another problem is sometimes finding help and being able to afford it. So, the truth is sometimes we're not in a situation that we can step away from that role and hire somebody to come in and care for our loved one full time. But there may be a way to set aside a day a week of getting a break for a few hours and going to do different things that ties into self-love and self-care so that when you come back, you have some strength. If you drain your well and there's nothing there, there's nothing for you, for yourself, or for your loved ones, including the one that you're trying to take care of. So it's vital. It's absolutely vital. And unlike a cell phone, you don't have a indicator, an image of, hey, your battery's low. But there's different signs that your body and your mind's going to start to tell you. And it's going to be a matter if you just push down and try to act like you're better than bad and you've got it. Or if you say, hey, I can't do this anymore. And I look back now and I do have some regrets that I didn't say I can't do this anymore. I need more help. Because I think there was some times that I tried to be Wonder Woman and do it all because I thought there was nobody else to do it. And there was also some times that I should have just stopped and not did these other things because it pulled from, other parts of my life, including my kids, and that's another side note, as a caregiver, you have other responsibility, including to the people that are alive and that are going to continue to live, that you can invest some of you and receive back from those other people in your life. If you have this is a really hard one, you guys, but if you have a spouse that's dying, or even a parent, you can do 110%, but you also have to remember that you also have kids that you've got to be an active part of their life so that life isn't only about death. And that does not mean walk away or not be involved, but it means taking responsibility and looking at how things are and making sure that there is, if there is such a thing as balance. I don't know that there is, but at least for a minute, to do something so that it doesn't just blow up in your face, So a couple of other things, for caregiver, obviously, we talked about the sleep deprivation, but doing some things where you're getting at least the minimal amount of sleep, taking naps that, may be required, and then looking at your diet. We keep hearing more and more about Mediterranean-based diets, a heavy plant-based diets. And I mean, it's fantastic food between hummus and baba ganoush and just tons of options to look at. But that's something to consider. Are you eating food on the go and frozen meals that's overloaded with preservatives and whatever other crap that's in there? Some of those things can be, looking into meal prepping, of trying to get like a week worth of cooking done on a Sunday or a Saturday or something. Especially with fall season, it's a good time for cooking soup, and that can give you a couple days. But make sure that you're eating right. And when I was listening to that Dr. Edward from Mayo Clinic, it was kind of cool. He was talking about the benefits of pets. And I do have to tell you, I know with my children, we were very fortunate with the gifts of pets. We have 2 dogs and a cat, and there was definitely a lot of healing, support, and love that those pets shared with our families. So we were so incredibly lucky. But that's something to think about, but just a different way of being able to express your love and de-stress in a positive way, instead of turning to, drugs and alcohol to numb the effect of what you're going through, or even worse things than that. But they even say that with lack of sleep, that it can have the same negative effects as if you're intoxicated. So looking at that and having a reality check, am I really getting enough rest? And it's so hard, especially if your loved one's in the hospital, to say, I'm going to go home and take a shower and take a nap. And there could be a lot of guilt that's attached to that. That's something that you're going to have to work on. And part of it is you've got to do a reality check of looking at how full is your tank. Even if, I know I always give these analogies about cars, but here I go again. Even if you have your car and you're flying down the road, you got to get to, Children's Hospital, and you're in a beautiful car, but you look down and the gas gauge is at E and the light comes on. Son of a bloop, 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 bloop. Yeah, that's that kind of stuff that just makes you want to go, I can't take it. But what do? You got to pull over and get gas. It doesn't matter. You got to pull over and get gas, or the car's not going to make it. And dude, you're the car. You got to pull over and you got to get the gas, and you have to not feel guilty that you went and fueled up. And then that way you can go back and you'll be able to be there, and you'll be able to give more of yourself and do it in a way of coming from a place of love instead of a place of complete exhaustion, self-destruction. It's hard. And I'll tell you, like, where I had a little bit of my big wake-up call of the impact of caregiver burnout. It actually happened after I got through my storm. And we had in our family, it was a total of 9 deaths within 2 years. That was from my side of the family and my husband's side of the family. And that included my husband passing away. And it was predominantly people that were in our close inner circle of our family. And it was, 3 of them I had more responsibility of overlooking. The other ones, it hurt, but it was different with these 3 because there was so much responsibility. And that was not even including, dealing with running companies and trying to raise 2 boys and trying to get through grieving. And I mean, I could go through the whole list. I probably don't have to because you probably have the same list that I have if you've listened through this far. But I ended up finally passing through that time, and then I found myself at a place of it was like grief, depression, and burnout that had been suppressed for 5 years, something like that. And I found myself where it was to the point I didn't even want to get out of bed. There was just so much exhaustion. It was 1,000 times like running as hard as you could and then collapsing on the ground. That's what I felt like. And literally it felt like there was like ball and chain on my legs, and I just couldn't do anymore. There was no more to give, and especially after they had left, and had passed on, that's when, and especially after the last one that was counting on me, aside from my kids, I'm talking about the people that were in a stage of death and dying. After she had passed away, it was just like too much, and the one thing I will tell you that got me through that was my faith and leaning into prayer and meditation. I think for a while I had really turned to a lot of isolation and not really wanting to talk to people. And part of it was just of seeing the world a little bit differently after witnessing that, and maybe being detached from some things that are of this earthly place, that we're residing in right now. But in just a different kind of way. And for those of you that have walked through the stage of, caring for loved ones long term, and then eventually them passing away, you may be very familiar with some of these, effects and how it can impact you. I will say to you, there were also a lot of gifts that came through that, a better understanding and enriched compassion for humanity, a more honest look at my life and the way that I live my life, including the people that I surround myself with, and including the type of decisions that I allow to come into my life. And a lot of that has to do with who are you surrounding yourself with. And a forewarning for that as a caregiver, and when you're going through these struggles, you will unfortunately find some, I guess you'll call them bottom feeders, that will gravitate, they'll be attracted in whatever way that may not have the best intent for you. So being mindful of that, because knowing that you're lacking sleep, you're lacking maybe even support and overwhelmed, that there's some people that will, unfortunately, as overwhelmed as you are, there are some that will find ways to try to exploit that to their advantage. So take caution and make sure that you've got your inner circle good and tight and filled with the right people, so that as you take these steps forward, where you have to be powerful and strong, even when others aren't getting how strong it requires you to do what you're doing, that you're not being burdened by whatever that may be, and that could be like the other day I was talking to you guys about those lotto scams that they have, sending and targeting through email and, whatever. Just make sure that you're aware. And it's about keeping yourself safe and keeping yourself loved. And you've got to find ways to do that in a way that's healthy and is truly for the greater good. If it's good, it's good. And if there's all these other things that are going on and you're feeling so overwhelmed, you just can't do it. No matter how good you think that is, it's not good, because eventually your battery is going to be totally gone. So before you get there, start leaning into doing more, a little bit more of this self-love and a little bit of TLC. One thing I'm going to leave you with this is this tip that somebody had shared with me years ago, is when going through stress and trauma, to work on doing Epsom salt with magnesium in your bath. And it has to do with relaxing the muscles and trying to get this trauma out and getting to a place of, hey, we've got good times ahead of us still. We still have a little bit of love and life to live. But the only way that's going to happen is if you take care of you. And I'm wishing that for you. I'm wishing that for you, that you feel guilt-free, to take the time to love yourself so that you can be there for your other ones. We're going to be starting this Facebook page, Caregiving for the Caregiver. I actually started it. I just haven't engaged in it. But we're going to start sharing more messages like this. And then hopefully, if all of us start talking, we can create this community to help and give back to each other and to let others know, hey, you're not alone. And maybe show, how are we doing it? How are we doing it? I'm getting by through each day. All right, my beautiful friends, I wish you so much peace, so much love, just all that good stuff in life. Stop being so hard on yourself. All right, in the meantime, keep taking those little baby steps, you guys. God bless.